I'll wear what's called the Filipiniana, and it's a very traditional Filipino form.
What if I told you the most watched entrance at the Oscars of sports was not the woman who just won Sportswoman of the Year? What if I told you the camera didn't follow the champion? It followed a 20-year-old girl ranked 44th in the world, who had just lost her last match 1-6. And what if the reason why tells you everything about where tennis is actually heading right now? Stay with me, because this story gets more interesting every single minute. Alex Eala walked into the Palacio de Cibeles in Madrid on April 20, 2026. The building itself is not a tennis court. It's a neoclassical city hall turned cultural landmark sitting at the absolute center of one of Europe's most sports-obsessed cities. The Laureus World Sports Awards were happening inside, the event the sporting world literally calls the Oscars of sports. Novak Djokovic, 22 Grand Slam titles, was co-hosting. Eileen Gu, 3 Olympic gold medals, was standing beside him. It was the first time in Laureus history that 2 active athletes had ever shared that hosting stage together. Aryna Sabalenka was in the room. She had just been named Sportswoman of the Year. Elena Rybakina was there too. And the WTA's official camera, the organization that tracks every single point Eala earns, every ranking she climbs, every match she plays, did not follow Sabalenka down the red carpet. It followed Alex Eala. The caption was 5 words. From court to carpet. No ranking. No credential. No context. Just her name and a Filipino flag. And 74,000 likes later, the internet had already figured out what the WTA was saying without saying it. But here's what most people completely missed about that entrance. The gown she was wearing wasn't from a sponsor. It wasn't borrowed from a European fashion house. It was designed and stitched by her uncle, Roland Eala, a renowned Filipino fashion designer, built specifically for that one night. A full beige chiffon dress with pleated bodice details and a piña bolero on top. The piña fiber, for those who don't know, is woven from pineapple leaf. It is one of the most distinctly Filipino materials that exists in formal wear. Her uncle quite literally stitched the Philippines into the fabric of the gown she wore into a room full of the most documented athletes on the planet. And she did this, pay attention to this detail, at the exact moment when her clay court results were giving her every legitimate reason to arrive quietly, to slip in, keep her head down, and wait for better days. Instead, she walked in wearing her family's hands on her back. That is not a styling choice. That is a declaration. Now let me give you the honest picture, because this story only works if we don't skip the hard parts. Alex Eala's clay court record entering Madrid 2026 was not good. It wasn't a narrative problem or a framing issue. It was a documented, statistically real problem. She had suffered early exits in her first 2 clay events of the year. A round of 16 departure in Linz. Then a first-round loss in Stuttgart. The Stuttgart result was the bluntest of all. She faced Leylah Fernandez, world number 25, a 2021 US Open finalist, someone who prepares for every match with tactical precision that most players on tour simply don't match. The first set scoreline? 6-1. Eala held exactly 1 game. The second set stretched further, but the ending was the same. 6-4. Exit. And if that wasn't enough context for you, her record against Czech players at that point stood at 0 wins and 13 losses. Documented. Verified. A specific recurring vulnerability against a player profile that shows up constantly on clay at every major event. Rome was coming. Roland Garros was coming. The draw was only going to get deeper and slower and harder from here. But wait. Here is the part that actually changes how you read the Stuttgart loss. In her post-match interview, Fernandez was asked about the difficulty of the match. And what she said was not what you say after a comfortable win. Her coach had told her at 0-30, 5-4 in the second set, when the match was almost closed, he told her, she's not going to go down easy. She's going to fight. You're going to have to take the match. That's not what coaches say about players they expect to roll over. But then Fernandez went further. Unprompted, she reached back to a memory from years earlier at the Rafa Nadal Academy. She remembered watching Eala hit, turning to her own coach and saying, "Wow, she plays quick." And then in the post-match, she said, "It was like a mirror." He said, "Look, it's exactly like you." The woman who beat Eala 6-1, 6-4 spent her entire post-match interview comparing the player she just beat to herself. Not as flattery, as the explanation for why the match required her coach's emergency instruction during match point. Let that sit for a second. And now we need to talk about something that happened even before Stuttgart, because this story has a layer most people haven't connected yet. March 23rd, Miami Open, round of 16. Karolina Muchova, world number 13, defeated Alex Eala 6-0, 6-2 in exactly 1 hour. 1 hour. From a player who had just reached her career high ranking of 29, the highest any Filipino woman had ever climbed in WTA history, just 1 week earlier. ESPN's headline used the word dismal. That word was not unfair. Muchova didn't adjust mid-match. She controlled every dimension from the first game to the last. Eala couldn't solve any of it. So let's be precise about the timeline here. Career high of 29, 1 week later, a 6-0 dismantling, then Stuttgart, 6-1, then the Laureus red carpet, 5 days after the worst loss of her clay season, then Madrid. That is the actual sequence. And knowing that sequence is the only way to understand what happened next. April 22nd. 1 day after the Laureus ceremony, Eala walked onto the Arantxa Sanchez Stadium clay at the Mutua Madrid Open. Her first-round opponent was Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, a qualifier ranked 116th, but also a former Madrid semifinalist and a 34-year-old professional who has competed on that exact court at the highest level for 15 years. This was not a soft draw. Pavlyuchenkova knows clay. The scoreline was 6-3, 6-3. Eala needed 1 hour and 31 minutes. She landed 68% of her first serves and won 76% of those points. Pavlyuchenkova, by comparison, won just 50% of her own first serve points, on a surface that had handed Eala a 6-1 first set less than a week earlier. She controlled the structure of the match from the 5th game of the first set onward and never let go. The people who had been watching this story before it became a story did not need the score explained to them. They had already built their conclusion from the evidence before the match was over. The score just confirmed what they could already see. And here's where it gets even more interesting, because Greg Rusedski was saying it before any of this happened. Rusedski is not a commentator chasing engagement. He's a former world number 4, a 1997 US Open finalist, a man who has watched 2 full generations of clay court tennis from a position of documented professional expertise. When he talks about serve mechanics and surface-specific preparation, it comes from lived experience, not broadcast enthusiasm. He said it plainly on his podcast. She's getting into the later stages of tournaments, but once she gets there, she's getting beaten in pretty one-sided matches. She needs to improve the serve. He named the exact technical problem. He didn't dress it in false comfort. But then, in the same breath, he said, "I'd love to see her on this surface crack the top 20. She's too good a player not to make it into the top 10. A former world number 4 identifies a specific technical flaw and closes by saying the player is too good not to reach the top 10. That is not promotion. That is evidence with a conclusion attached. And he said it before Stuttgart, before the Laureus ceremony, before Madrid. He also said something else that tournament directors at WTA 1000 events are absolutely paying attention to. He compared what Eala means to Filipino sports culture to what Manny Pacquiao meant, and named the specific behavioral pattern he has personally observed. Her matches sell out wherever there is a Filipino community. A player ranked 44th generating sellout demand. That is a very different kind of institutional attention than her seeding would normally invite. The WTA did not put a camera on her at the Laureus because of her bracket position. They put it on her because something was already visible. Something the people closest to this story understood long before the mainstream started paying attention. Now let me give you the full picture of where this is going, because this is where it gets really serious. After Madrid, Eala is entered in the WTA 1000 Rome Open. Then the WTA 125 Parma Ladies Open. And then Roland Garros. May 24th, Paris. The French Open, which is not just a Grand Slam. It is the specific tournament that will determine whether her clay development has moved from compelling progress to legitimate contender on dirt. Her next opponent in Madrid is 19th seed Elise Mertens. Mertens is Belgian, experienced, and performs with the kind of disciplined consistency that WTA 1000 draws demand. That is not the Pavlyuchenkova match. The bracket will not offer similar comfort as it deepens. But the Pavlyuchenkova win changed the material conditions slightly. Eala now carries ranking points and match rhythm from a surface where she arrived holding a 6-1 first set memory from 7 days earlier. So here is the question that actually matters, and I need you to think about this honestly. Does what happened in Stuttgart represent the real ceiling? Or does what happened in Madrid represent where she is actually going? Because the arithmetic of these next 6 weeks will answer that question before June arrives. And the answer won't be delivered quietly. It'll be delivered in front of packed draws in Rome, in Parma, and finally in Paris, on the slowest clay in the world, in the stadium named after a man who defined what it means to dominate a surface. Let's go back to where this story really lives. April 15th, Stuttgart, a 6-1 first set from a player who described the loss as her own reflection in the mirror. April 20th, Madrid, a piña fiber gown stitched by her uncle's hands, worn into the Oscars of sports while the WTA's camera chose her entrance over the woman who just won Sportswoman of the Year. April 22nd, the Arantxa Sanchez clay, 6-3, 6-3, 68% first serves, 1 hour and 31 minutes of the exact controlled clay tennis that a former world number 4 said he would love to see her produce. After Stuttgart, she did not rebuild the narrative around the loss. She acknowledged Fernandez as a great player. She said she needed to improve. And then the very next week, she improved. That bridge, between the honest acknowledgement of a problem and the quiet action that solves it, is where this entire story lives. She wore her uncle's hands to the Oscars of sports. Then she went out the next day and won on clay. For most players on tour, those two sentences do not belong to the same week. For Alex Eala in April 2026, it was a Tuesday followed by a Wednesday. Elise Mertens is waiting. Roland Garros is at the end of this road. The clay season has 6 weeks left and this story is moving faster than anyone expected. Does Eala reach the round of 16 at Roland Garros? Or does clay stop her before Paris delivers its verdict? Drop your prediction in the comments right now because when that answer arrives, you are going to want to have been on record. Subscribe, because the next chapter of this story lands on Wednesday and this one is not slowing down.